those of you that know me from being around here for about 6 years, and those of you that are just starting, I just want to talk a little bit about, the demonstrations and stuff. And the problem I see of doing a demonstration is that we have people that know far more than I know. We have people that was in the same chair I was in six years ago. I didn't know a tenon from a tailstock. They could have gone together at that point as far as I know. And so it's really difficult to hit whatever everybody's interested in. We all have different equipment. We have different tools. We have different pieces of wood. We have, some of us not developed technique one. Some of us have too many techniques that we try that don't work. So, devil's in the details. I tend to gloss over some things. So if somebody's, if I miss something, just raise your hand and I'll try to go back. I don't know what I don't know. I can only tell you what I do know. So that's that for this. The other thing about demos, we've had the pro demonstrators, and when they come in, they haven't done 5 of an item. They haven't done 50. They've probably done 50 dozen or thousands of that particular item. And then we see one demo, and we think we're going to go home and make something that looks pretty close to what they showed us. And, it just doesn't work that way. And the first guy that started me with some lessons, I think I took about 3 or 4 lessons from him. And the first 3 or 4 times, all we did, we were cutting some cylinders, and you did a push cut downhill. That's all you did. And, well, that kind of got boring. Well, then he showed me how to scrape uphill. And that's about where it ended. But fortunately, I started about 3 or 4 months before the AAW meeting that was down in San Jose. And being at that meeting for 3 days, and I didn't know enough about equipment, didn't care about equipment yet. So sitting in the demonstrations was just really wonderful. And I would recommend Lyle Jamison's turning demos because he's got the simple cuts down. If you've got those, you got turning really. And for those of you that were able to go to Portland, I'm sure everybody enjoyed that and would agree that it's really well worthwhile. So so much for that. So what I want to say tonight is we need to learn to waste more wood. Don't try to get in and make something that's just wonderful and perfect and whatever, because first 1, 2, 5, 10, you're learning, they're getting better, but are they really where you want to end up? So this started for me with this article in the AAW magazine from June of last year, and Dennis Belcher was the author of the project. And I just want to pass that around because it was not only an inspiration for the vase, but he's done a lot of embellishments on it. He's doing paint, he's doing a little bit of carving. I don't know if he does any pyrographics sort of thing. So I had those 3 pieces, well actually I had a big triangle piece of walnut, and I thought, it'd been sitting in the corner of the shop. So I got out a compass and I figured, well, I could get those 3 pieces out of there. And that was the first three pieces I made. And it turned out reasonably well, and my daughters all liked it, so that's the gallery that I got to pass. So I thought, well, this would be really a cool project because that was pretty easy to do. And I just go down and get some poplar wood because it's cheap, it's dry, it turns nice. I did make a mistake, but that's also turned out to add more play. I got the boards that were just about an inch and a quarter thick. Well, that's too narrow for a vase, so then I had to figure out how to glue them together. And I don't have belt sanders and a lot of other stuff, so I had to learn how to face these things off true enough that I could glue them together. And again, it's added more to the play and more to the learning process. So the author, he starts off by showing you how to use one of the screw chucks. But then about the 6th paragraph, which I put an arrow to, if they get over 6 inches in diameter, it gets too wobbly. Well, geez, you get started and you cut yourself off at the pass. So this didn't make any sense. I put the screw in just to be able to show it. But then he goes on and he's cutting it off on one side and he's putting a glue block on. And then he's done a lot of them. I don't have a table saw. I got a bandsaw. So, and I've never put a waste block on anything. And so far, I don't see really the need for ever doing it. I mean, it could come along. So I figured out how to do it without using a glue block. And this is where we're at. So I'm just going to square this up the way I would do it. I'm going to add the tenon like we end up with here. And here's one that's cut on both sides. But I'm just calling this a circular tenon because that's what I grabbed. So I'm just going to pass this around and you can see what we're ending up with there. Now, these are the cuts I know, and as I'm going along, I'm just going to, for those of you that are just starting, I just want to, show you how we do a couple cuts. And there's nothing right, wrong. You can do them both ways, and so we'll just do that. So many of us, when we're starting, we'll get started here on an edge, and then we'll get too aggressive, and then we've skated. So part of this is just learning to make a nice, straight, smooth cut, right straight across the whole piece so it's nice and level. Until you skate off there a little bit. So you have to give it a little bit more. I should change this belt. This is about half speed to what I'm used to. Okay, that's pretty smooth. So that was a push cut, right? Here's a peel cut. You want to get things nice and smooth. It's also kind of, people call it a skew cut, peel cut. Now as you're doing this at home, do one cut, turn it off, look at it, feel it, and see which way you're turning it the smoothest. There is a difference on different woods. So what works on redwood is not going to work the same on poplar or any other wood. And so while you're doing the outside of a bowl or the inside of a bowl, play. Don't just hog it off like you see the pro guys. I mean, they know the wood, they know everything about it. They just go from the middle out in. They're using the same cut over and over and over. And, well, why? Because they've done that particular wood and that particular everything hundreds, if not thousands of times. So when we're starting out, we haven't got that experience. So, again, play. So I know that this side here is about 1/8 of an inch wider than the other one to get to the center line, so I'm going to take a little bit off here. Check that just to make sure. And that's reasonably close. Many times they're showing you to make the tenon as small as you can so that the jaws are almost closed. With this, you might want to end up re-chucking it several times. So I start with chuck almost all the way open because you get a good bite with the shark jaws, and I'm going to talk about that when I put those on the lathe. And then the other quick and easy thing that's to put your dovetail in there. I like just these 3-point tools, and the different diameters can give you the different lengths of your bevel there. Here we go. See, this particular one's got just about the right bevel for the, boom, you're done. So then the next thing we need to do is lay out the tenon. And I think I loaned my pencil. Oh, here it is. Okay. I don't use the carbides that much, but there's some things that they're really handy for. So one of the things that makes these handy is you've got a certain depth with the size of your carbide tip. That's a pretty good length to leave on that, like that sample that's going around. So if I cut in that deep to the edge on both sides, then I'm even, right? So it's just a quick way of doing that. And also you then get the experience of eating chips with a carbide tool. See all that nasty stuff in my face? You don't get that with a gouge. Okay, so we get that, then we're ready to mount it up in the chuck here. So we got a tenon on both sides. Well, I kind of skipped this, didn't I? I used the other blank. So we'll get this out of here. And you know, before you take this thing off, make sure you've checked that space between your jaws when they're open. So now jaw choices and chuck choices and jaw choices. The sharp jaws with the Vic mark are the tall jaws. You could not do this with the little short jaws that come with a chuck. It just wouldn't work. You can't get a hold of enough material. It's kind of narrow. You wouldn't really be much better off than you were with that screw chuck. Interestingly, the little Vic Mark 100 has 1.25 inch space. The 100 has 1 inch space, and I have an easy chuck. It has 7/8, and I don't know what all the other manufacturers have. But basically, you open it up all the way, and then you can mount it in a chuck like this. So we'll get rid of this piece here. This thing sits next to my lathe at home on the outboard turning tool. So I have this stand around, so I put it on there. So when I'm turning, all my drives are right here. A couple other tools that are handy. I've got a magnet on the back side here where I can have a chuck key and stuff. I like magnets a lot. And when it's not your lathe, it always seems to work harder.
Question, is that hard to get the center this way?
I was just going to speak to that. With this centerpiece here, what I do is bring this up as I'm tightening up the jaws, and I can wiggle it back and forth so I'm on that glue line. But if you don't have the glue line, then you're going to have to make some calculations so you drill right down the center. But that's just one of those little things that you can do there. So we'll take this out. There's a lot, I hear people talk about different ways to drill, and some slow, some fast. As long as the chips are ejecting, and you don't, pull your quill out, then I think you're doing whatever is good. So
That chuck's not seated.
isn't it? Sorry, thanks.
No, the chuck. The drill chuck. You've got to advance it.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Not used to this lathe. Thanks. When mine's out that far, it's seated. So. Well, that's a little too slow. So the nice way to do these is, you know, if you do 4 or 5 or 6 of them all at once, so you start to quit ejecting the chips. We're going to go back and forth here a little bit anyway. I found that when I started this way, you see I'm just a little bit off there. I've got a wow here and not here. When I first started doing these, I was cutting that dip in the top first, and I think that was a little harder than this way. You could, if you know you want to make it an inch or whatever, then you can just drill it that deep and then make this what we're going to do next here. And again, don't think just because you see somebody do it one way that that's the only way. So you make your dip in the top. Okay. See that little bump? Yeah, it would call it a catch, wouldn't it?
That's what I call it.
Yeah, and it did knock it off center. I think it's trying to go too fast in the demo because I have not done that before at home. So since we have to retighten the chuck here, I have a habit. I see a lot of the guys, you know, they give it a whoop and they quit. There's a certain amount of lag in a lot of chucks. If you tighten it once, you go around to the other side, you get a little bit more, and then when you don't get any more, you're tight, typically. And these, I tend to abuse them a little bit. I really crank on them. And I probably didn't do that because I meant to show that before we started turning here. So this is going to throw our wobble off here a little bit, but we'll just slow down. You can hear that jumping. This is as fast as it'll go, but when you got gaps, turn as fast as is safe, and that'll disappear. Well, that's about what I like. Some people might like it a little, you know, lower in the middle. It's hard to see with that camera angle. You've seen these other ones here. Let's just pass that one around. Again, until you've played with these things, you don't know what you're going to like. You know, you want it wide, you want it narrow, you want it deep. You know, you just have to play with it. So that's the whole point. I'm going to drill this a little deeper.
Arnie, is that piece of wood thicker than the ones you have over here?
You think?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is 2 of those pieces of wood.
Oh,
So hopefully you put them in pairs.
yes, I have. Some of them have 3.
Okay, that's a little off, but I think we're going to be safe enough to do this. Huh?
You didn't hold on to the Jacobs truck when you were backing out.
Yeah, I know. They shouldn't even be able to sell a chuck that doesn't have a screw to come in from the back of the industry. I mean, it just seems, everybody talks safety, and yet I haven't seen one drill chuck that's made with a rod that you can bring in from the back.
I have one.
Huh?
I have one.
I've heard of it. I know people have mentioned it, but just as a general rule,
how do you gotta be, if you tighten it up, you can't send it out. I mean, it doesn't,
Right, right.
Just so it's obvious, when you're backing it out, if you don't hang on to
Right.
it, it can pull out of the Morse taper, and all of a sudden the thing's running on like that. And I have
it'll get
about,
your attention.
I have about a ½ inch of skin that I have to show for that.
You chose to sit there.
Well, it's actually aimed over here.
Maybe have a wood wall fly around it. Chunk of metal.
I take a pretty good chunk out of my hand. Try to figure out what to do.
Now, at this point, you could decide, well, I'm one step ahead here. At this point, I'm going to do exactly what I've started to do here. You can start to shape this thing out. So you know that whatever your radius you want out here at the end, you've already got it kind of coming in all here because you got the tenon there. You got a shoulder here, and you've got a tenon out here. So just start, you know, rounding it up and making your shape. Again, that article, this guy's gluing a picture on there of how deep he's going to drill his hole, and then he's, you know, figuring out what radius he wants to do, and making a template for that. I mean, the fun of turning is that you don't have a rule. You know, you get your eye trained to see what you want to see, and you look at it and feel it, and go for it. You don't have to do all these step. We're not making furniture. Okay, let's do this one. So this is my big old bowl gouge. I've got really long wings on it. And I like this because it's fun to do. I like to do the peel cuts. And it's just fun to do with that long wing on there. I don't want that in my way. Oh, and since somebody asked, I did flatten these things off with basically doing the peel cut that I'm doing, and then I just took this block on the tool rest with sandpaper wrapped around it and screwed it up. This piece has never seen sandpaper, so you can get pretty close. Huh? This is the same as if you got a blank and you got a bowl, you're going to cut off that whole corner, right? You're going to come from your base all the way around. So, do a push cut, do a pull cut, do a peel cut. See which one works best on that particular wood when you're way out at the edge where it doesn't matter. Get your catches there. The other thing about this peel cut, you sort of just hold it down here at your hip. You got it up here at a nice angle. Short guys can work on tall lathes pretty nice that way. So we're center line there. I know this tenon's big, so I'm going to make it a little bit small. Then I can get a little bit more of my shape going. And it tells you the tail on the wood here. See it pulled a chip out? So we'll have to work around that. Before I turn this thing off and change something, I want to put a tenon dovetail in there. So at this juncture, what I would do is to take this out of here and cut my base off. Now you notice in the article that's going around, he leaves a round bottom on them and makes nice little feet and things, which I think is a really cute little idea to do. Again, it's another step. I haven't tried that. I think that, again, whether you've got a dado blade, you can run 2 slots on your a table saw with it clamped into a fixture, and you got it all done kind of quick. I don't have that, so I have to figure out how to do that. So I made a little sled for using on the bandsaw. So it's got the hole for the tenon, and the back side of the small one. These will all fit on that sled just fine to go through the bandsaw. And so, it's just another piece of wood that's there to use. And it really doesn't matter whether you slops around or not, because you're going to hold something on a bandsaw. And you're just cutting this little bit off the bottom.
So what does the guy in the article do?
He was making waste blocks and just, I don't know, just all kinds of stuff. So, that's a pair that the top and bottom came off. So, again, that's just another skill to learn how to use a bandsaw. So, and all those things are really important. Well, you did the drill press. I was thinking about that, though. The chuck keys do make quite a good projectile. So at this point, I've turned half of this thing. I can flip it around, and I can do the other half. But it's just a matter of playing with curves and, beads and coves, but kind of in a bowl configuration, because this is set up like a bowl blank, and it's not hard. And, we haven't made a big mess here tonight, but if I had done, 5 to this same stage or 10 to this same stage, and you just do it over and over again, then it really gets pretty easy. Making little birdhouses. When I learned how to do those, I think I made about 100 of them. Well, if you just do one step, do it, then the next step, do it. Suddenly it gets to be pretty easy at each one of those steps. But if you just do one birdhouse, you go through this step, then take it to the next step, and the next step, and you end up with one birdhouse, that's a lot of work. I was blessed with a shop teacher in high school that, if you kind of needed to do it once, great. If you needed to do it twice, okay. Third time, we're building jigs. And it can be just something as simple as like on a drill press. If you're going to do something the same way, and you can like make a block where you can slip it in, it's clamped down, you slide it in there, boom, take one out, put one in, take one out, put one in. And all those things just make the joy of doing woodwork a lot more fun. And that's the whole point of all this. A couple other things to talk about.
Are you going to turn this one around?
I sure can, sure.
But I don't know how you do the final section.
Oh, well, I've got a blank to show you on that, too. Okay.
Just that.
So you see, by turning a new tenon on here, I'm the same as this one. That might not have been lined up for that one. So every time I flip-flop, I'll redo the tenon a little bit. That's the reason I start with a large tenon. There's one reason not to start too narrow a block. It's hard to get rid of that pivot point.
trying to get rid of it about 200 feet.
Yeah. So at this point, let's start playing a little bit. So I got a flat spot there, and where's the tools? Right here. I have to get a set of the beading tools, so let's see what a bead looks like on there. Oh, that looks not too bad. Let's see what a square one looks like. Again, just as you're going through these things, just play. Just intentionally wasteful. One big, two little. Supposed to do them in threes. Let's do two more big ones in the middle. That'll probably look wrong. Huh? Beading tools. But you can do this with a gouge. You can do it with anything. You know, just you don't want 15 bases that are nice and smooth like that, especially out of poplar. I mean, you should have bored yourself to death before you get done. So, and again, you know, you don't like that, you know, take it off. So I just pulled these out just as an example of playing. I lost my train of thought here. I was thinking about three things at once. Well, at this point, I could put it on the vacuum chuck and go from there. There was something I was going to talk about, a tool or some dang thing. It'll come to me before I'm over.
What do you do if you don't have a vacuum chuck?
Well, okay. No, I'll show that when we set up the vacuum, okay? Everybody uses jam chucks, and a jam chuck can be really anything. You're just jamming it against something. So I'll just use the vacuum chuck with no vacuum as a jam chuck. And that way you get the same idea of working with it. There's a lock on this thing somewhere, isn't there? And of course, there's several ways to use vacuum, and several have talked about that. The easiest way, I think, to make a lot of your own vacuum chucks, Vicmark makes these inserts that fit in the back of all their chucks. They make one for every chuck.
Different.
Well, I'm getting there. The one that happens to fit the PVC is the one that fits the Vicmark 100. And you can get these 1.25 inch, whatever thread size they make them for. It happens that these are metric. This is a PVC piece bought at any American plumbing store, and it just happens to work. And so,
But it has to be the 100.
huh?
It has to be the 100.
That's what we've said, yes, the Vicmark 100. So you can put this on. There's people that make different adapters here. It would be really hard to do it on this particular jet. My Vic Mark has it threaded on there, and there's actually an adapter that screws right into it. Others have made some that just, they got a couple O-rings that fit into that hole, and so you don't have to use the other one that I'm going to use. But what I like about this, and I didn't discover this till I made my third or fourth or fifth vacuum chuck. Well, there's the little guy. And then I got one that fits in between there. And I don't glue them for this very reason, that they hold vacuum without ever gluing them. So I've got a 2.5, 3, and a 3.5. And actually I've got a 5 that fits over the outside of this. So with one adapter, one deal, with a little bit of cleverness, you've got all the different vacuum valves that you need. And the difference between a 3-inch and a 4-inch, a 3-inch will have 88 pounds of hold with 25 inches of mercury. A 4-inch has 157, and a 5-inch has 245 pounds of hold. When do you have too much hold? How about never? There's no such thing as holding it too well. Use the largest size bell you can use to hold your piece.
Unless there's a thin bottom and it pops the bottom.
Then that's called experience, and you played a little bit. Yeah, but so this setup comes from the Frugal pump, and I'm not trying to sell his pumps, but they're good pumps. They're a little over $100. He will sell you something like this, and the only mistake he made, instead of using regular Schedule 40 PVC, he uses drain pipe or some cheaper version of the whole thing. You can turn that off of there and put on a good piece of Schedule 40. I wanted to make my own, so I did the adapter just like the other one. But that's so when you get you're doing a demo at a club, you got another way out to put vacuum to the lathe. When you start with vacuum, see, I'm going to only get 10 pounds there. That's just not very good, is it? Now we got 10. Zero. Okay, we got some problem. So when you can't figure out what's going on with your vacuum, start back closest to your pump. So I got a problem in between here someplace. I'm only getting 10 with nothing. And the only thing I can figure out at the moment is that packaging and getting it here cracked something. No. Okay, we're not using vacuum, we're using a jam chuck.
You know that the needle isn't moving when you turn it on or off.
I see that. There's something haywire there with transportation. I checked it out, it works fine at home, so I buggered something up between here and the house, and I don't have a clue what it is. But that's the nature of vacuum. I mean, when it works great. And once you get used to using it, but you see what I did? First thing, I go back to here. Now I'd actually have just to go back each one of these things. Well, we can go back one more just real quick. Take the filter out. Maybe we crack the filter.
When you rotate it, you move the gauge
Well, now I got it up to 15. But see, it should be a lot higher than that. It should be instantly 25. I've got something going on here. I don't know what it is. So, we'll adjust. One of the handy little things for doing the jam chucking, if you got a nice surface that you want to preserve, you can turn a piece of plastic, thread it so it fits on your tailstock. There's any number of ways. You can put a piece of padding in here, like you might have here on your chuck. So it just depends, how exotic you're working with and what works. It's actually easier, probably not to use this because when you start centering things up, if you're using your regular tailstock, you got the point right here. As long as we're playing, why make it hard? So even though you're here, you could have this thing squeezed up, with a round surface on the backside. You can have this thing a little bit all over the place. But I would submit that if one side's a little different than the other, unless you're going to display them having somebody looking at the edge of your piece, it really doesn't matter if they're not exactly the same. You want to show the wood like in the walnut. Here, if you've done embellishments or whatever, it's not the embellishments you put on this ridge that counts, it's the embellishments that you put on the big flat surface. So. I've got a tip I want to use here, and I don't. That's not it. Where did I lay it? Here it is. Nope, that's the other one. Okay, well, we'll just work with what we got. Okay, you can see there's a wobble there, but again, we're not going to be too much worried about it. So now we're just squeezing it between two spots, right? There's no vacuum holding it. I've gotten used to vacuum. You can be pretty brave with the vacuum because it really does hold. You got a couple 100 pounds of hold there if you're at 25 inches of mercury. So push cut. Pretty self-explanatory, you're just pushing. You can hold it flat, kind of a shear straight. Again, you can look at these different cuts as you're going, and you can tell that some that are smoother than others, some that are not so smooth. Try to work out a little bit of a curve there. So even without suction, you can get it really close. The other thing you can do too is even with suction, I would sometimes play with this several times with the vacuum and back this off, change it just a little bit. and try to get that to run really smooth, you know, on its own. Most of it's just a little bit of patience, you know, in terms of truing things up. And if you don't have a spot with the tailstock or you don't want to mar things up, you can turn on the vacuum and look at it, give it a pencil mark, and then learn how to adjust it from that. You can take your valve, crack it a little bit so you're like down at just 5 pounds. It's just kind of barely hanging on there. You've got to give it a little nudge, turn the vacuum up, turn it on, run a pencil line, and see how close you are. And you can just keep doing that. It doesn't take very many times to get a skill for where you're going, where you're at, and vacuum makes it just really quick and easy. And I use it on big bowls, little bowls, you know, you name it, platters. You'll find some woods that you need to have finish on one side. The wood's so porous, it's like trying to put vacuum on a porous sponge. You know, you get zero out of it. But if you get say on the inside of a bowl, you get the finish on it, you might need to put on 2 or 3 coats and let it dry for quite a while. But then you got a nice long bell like this. You can reach in, do your vacuum, then you can do the outside of your foot the way you want it and everything. First time I ran into that with like zero vacuum was sycamore. It was a tree that came down at our old house that our friends bought. Of course, we had to have some of the wood. And did 2 or 3 pieces, roughed in, and then I was going to vacuum chuck it. It was like, you could just hear the wind whistling through the thing. So you had to change up. So I've skipped around a bit, but what I really hope is that you just forget about what it is you're doing and play with the wood. You know, this poplar, I got excited about doing this. So I went down to the lumber yard and I bought three planks, and I think it was $59, and there's enough wood there. I think it was like 40 or 60 bowls, I don't remember, or these vases. That's a lot of vases, and I've still got a lot of blanks at home. So I'm going to play with this because it seems like it's a nice, fairly hard wood. It takes a nice sanding, and then I want to do some embellishments on it, and just waste it away, you know, get the skill with a piece of really cheap wood, and then go from there. I know what it was that I forgot earlier. When you get things cut out of the holes here and a flat spot here, making a little sanding paddle is really a lifesaver. Because if this is out like this, there's all kinds of stuff going on there. I'm not going to put my fingers on this puppy, but I can do this. You know, I can work it. We don't want to make too much dust here. And just size them with your sandpaper. This is a half sheet of sandpaper. So, cut a sheet of sandpaper in half, figure out how much you want it to fold over, or make a long one that takes a full sheet of sandpaper. If you've got bigger pieces you're doing, then you just make a longer paddle and fold it in, and you can just hold it together with some rubber bands. A good foam like this, yoga pads would make a really good padding, you know, a really thin material. And then also on the back side, it doesn't hurt with the glue that you're gluing your pads on. Just put some glue on the back side. Don't glue anything to it, but it helps just to stick to the sandpaper just that little bit. It keeps it from sliding out. So again, just what, 1/4 inch plywood. And I've got these set up in a drawer. I've got 100 to 600. And so whenever I want to do, it's just taking out another paddle. And even after it comes out, you know, you've got what's been on the exposed, but then you've got this much on both sides that hasn't been used. And so by that point, you can roll it up 4 times, and there you got a nice fresh edge for doing a little bit of touch-up by hand. So I really get a lot of use out of the whole sheet doing this, but I never have my fingers around anything that's not absolutely smooth. It's just not good.
Just talking to Steve, I wonder what it'd be like to glue 2 pieces of Baltic ply together, 3/4 inch Baltic ply, and make one of these vases out of that. It looks like it'd be very geometric. Would that leak air?
No, it wouldn't leak air, because you got all the plies and all the glues. Yeah, you'd be fine with that.
I just think that would be an interesting,
Well, you know, some people like plywood, so go for it.
I think one for sure.
So I'm sure I've skipped over something. What, is there any step along the way here that isn't just total mud? And again, this was the way I got around not doing a glue block versus if you look up that article. So if you don't have, you know, shark jaws, then it's not going to work for you. You're going to have to figure out another way to do it if you want to do this kind of thing. So I think the fun of wood turning is that the fact that there's really 0 rules, figure it out. So that's it. Since I didn't have my vacuum, I couldn't tell you how.